scripture reading this morning is from 3 different books, and a common thread going through them is righteousness. So the first reading is from Job chapter 29, verses 14 to 16. I put on righteousness and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe in a turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy, and I championed the cause of the stranger. Second reading is from Isaiah chapter 32, verses 16 through 20. Then justice will dwell in the house of wilderness, and righteousness abide in the truthful field. The effect of righteousness will be peace, and the result of righteousness, quietness and trust forever. My people will abide in a peaceful habitation, in secure dwellings, and in quiet resting places. The forest will disappear completely, and the city will be utterly laid low. Happy will you be, who sow beside every stream, who let the ox and the donkey range freely. And the third book is from Matthew, chapter 5, verse 6, and it's the Beatitude. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Praise God for the living word.
Be in a moment of prayer together. May your word be a light to us, Lord. And may the words of my lips be acceptable in thy sight. And may all of our meditations on your word be acceptable as well. You who are our rock and our redeemer. Amen. Amen. Yesterday I had to, I did some fasting to get ready for a blood test in the morning. And I was thinking as I was driving toward Exeter, because the place where I normally get my blood tests, being it's Saturday, they didn't, where my blood work done, it was closed. And I got to thinking about a number of years ago when I used to fast on a somewhat regular basis as a spiritual discipline to become aware of the hungry in the world and to maybe sharpen some of my own awareness. And how it became one of the things I became so sensitive to was that when you're hungry, and you watch TV, you will have unless you're hungry, you have no awareness of how many commercials are tied in with food. And I thought of children or adults who are hungry, who have a TV, but what they see on the screen is something that they can't eat. And it was brought home, and the lab was very busy. I said to the person, is it always this busy? Because I hadn't gone to get blood drawn for a long time. She said, no, not normally. And she said it's busy around 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'd get there about 8, I think it was, because I was putting up tomatoes. And so I get over it, and it was quite a while. And a guy came in and sat beside me for quite a bit, and we couldn't help but overhear a couple other conversations, and somebody was talking about this wonderful pastry shop in Newmarket, and on and on. And the guy next to me says, he said, I I am really hungry. And I said, well, that conversation doesn't help you, does it? He said, I really like food. He said, I'm diabetic and I really like food. And he said, oh, I had my bottle of water when I went to bed last night, you know. And they said, before I went to bed, I was watching TV. And we flipped it, it's a food channel, into something else. And on and on and on. When we're really hungry, or when we're really thirsty, there's a craving that is hard to satisfy. And there are people in the world who thirst for water. Even some in Houston now, because the water is not safe. I've never been really, really, really hungry. Or really, really, really thirsty. Somebody was describing going across the desert. And he said as they went and they were with guides on their camels, they realized that one of the water containers that they had a leak in it. And they were without water for some time. And there was a spring up ahead, and he said, my partner and I, we got to thinking about, what if that water is infected at that spring? The guides are going to take those camels and leave us there. And he was worried. When we really crave something deep, that's the type of hunger or thirst that Jesus is talking about in this beatitude. When you hunger and thirst for righteousness, for that which is justice, for that which is correct. Job, in the book of Job, I put on righteousness and it clothed me. My justice was like a robe and a turban. I was eyes to the blind and feet to the lame. I was a father to the needy, and I championed the cause of the stranger. To hunger and thirst for righteousness. In a book, one of the books I've been using as a resource for this series is by a man named Jim Forrest, who's a Orthodox priest, and who used to be chair of the Fellowship for Reconciliation. He's lives in Greece. And he told a story about a woman that I had never didn't know her story. And I wanted to share it with you this morning because for me it captures what it means to have hunger and thirst for righteousness. I had help from Z as to how to pronounce the last name. And if she steps out, that's good. Now I can pronounce it. If it's wrong, she won't know it. But her name was Maria Sharkova. And she was born in 1891 for an aristocratic family in Latvia. And she was very literary, had published things at that time, and which were read in St. Petersburg and at different places. During that time, you remember the Russian Revolution was beginning to bubble. And she had become a Bolshevik, and there was an anti-Bolshevik movement. She was part of the Socialist Revolutionary Party. And when the Bolsheviks overthrew the Democratic government government in October of 1917, she left for Annapa on the Black Sea coast. And she was anti-Bolshevik, I should say that. And she married an anti-Bolshevik husband, a man. And she became mayor of the city that they lived in. She had 2 sons. And then there became a lot of antagonism against her and her husband, and they had to flee again. And they went to France, to Paris, and there one of her 2 sons died of meningitis. When this happened to her, it became a transforming experience for her. Life is sometimes that way. When difficult things come our way, it makes us ask questions. She had a profound religious conversion. She emerged from this deep sadness into a more authentic and purified life, is how she described herself. She felt she saw a new road before her and a new meaning to life. And this was to be a mother for all who need maternal care, assistance, or perfection, or protection. And she began to immerse herself in an effort to save and help Russian refugees. She sought them out in prisons, hospitals, mental asylums, and in the slums. Increasingly, she emphasized the religious dimension of her work, and she began to see every person as an icon of God. And an icon is something, you look at, and the idea is you don't worship the icon, you look through the icon and you see God. So she was saying that she saw God in every person and began to treat them in this way and to accept them unconditionally for whoever they were, and to venerate this image of God in everyone. Her husband died, or they were separated, I'm not sure that part of it. And her bishop urged her to become a nun within the order, since her marriage had ended, but she took the step only with the assurance that she would be free to develop a new monasticism, which meant not in a church, not connected to a church, but out on her own and to work with people. And they agreed to that, and she, in 1932, she made her monastic vows, born in 91, so 932, about 41 years of age at that time. And she set up this place with a chapel, a soup kitchen, a place for the homeless to come and stay, and also her own cot was in the basement as her cell where she could go. And during this time, her house became a center not only for the homeless and the hungry, but also a place where the intellectuals came and they discussed what does it mean to be faithful to God, and what does it mean in terms of justice and righteousness. Now, what took place in 1941, we all know, besides my birth, but in Paris in those years, there became persecution of the Jewish people. And in the context of the Nazi racism, she began to befriend the Jewish people a lot. And she began to put her own life at risk. In fact, there was a huge stadium over there in the Paris area there was, and she used to smuggle, and that was where the Jews were enclosed, were sent there. And she smuggled Jewish children out of that stadium in garbage cans for their freedom. And she did this for quite a while, and then she came under suspicion by the Nazis, and they questioned it, and she said, "You're right, that's what I'm doing, because the Jewish people are children of God." And she wrote something about remember how they had to wear the yellow patch, and she wrote about that. And then later another priest who became very active in this movement, and her other son, Yuri, became very active in helping the Jewish people. And then Yuri and the priest were arrested, and they were sent to prison. Yuri was being taught by the priest to become a priest. And as he was, one of the last things that her son wrote was that I would ask for forgiveness from anyone that I've ever wronged. And I want you to know that I'm very glad that what I'm doing is the right thing to do for justice and for the righteousness for all people. The priest had a conversation with a German officer who said, "You know, we will release you if you will promise never again to aid Jews." And Father Dmitri responded, "I can say no such thing. I am a Christian and must act as I must." And he was struck. And then Hoffman, the German officer, said, "Jew lover, how dare you talk of helping those swine as being a Christian duty?" And Father Dmitri, recovering from being struck, held up the crucifix and said, "Do you know this Jew?" And he was beaten again. And so Yuri and him were sent off to one of the concentration camps, and they both died. Maria was eventually sent to Buchenwald, and there she continued to minister to those who were hungry, sharing her food, sharing what she had, reaching out to those others who were prisoners. And the only thing that she did keep a cloth and had a needle, and made a picture of the Virgin Mary as an icon with the wounded Jesus in her arms. And then in 1945, on Good Friday, when the Russian troops were coming to free, you could hear the guns firing away to come and rescue them. They began to began to send more of the Jewish women to their death. And Maria's exchanged places with one of the Jewish women to save her life, and gave her life at that point. And one of the last things that she had written, during that period of time, "At the last judgment, I shall not be asked whether I was successful in my ascetic exercises, nor how many vows and prostrations and liturgies I made. Instead, I shall be asked, did I feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit the sick and the prisoners? That is all that I shall be asked." to hunger and crave righteousness. Some people stand out in doing that. Jesus really was saying that to everybody. He said, blessed are you when you hunger and crave righteousness, or hunger and thirst for righteousness, for you will be satisfied. And that's what happens to her. And even Uri, before his death, wrote these words. He said, I am absolutely calm, somewhat proud to share Mama's fate. I promise you I will bear everything in dignity. What happens sooner or later, we shall all be together. I say in all honesty that I am not afraid of anything